On this video, I want to discuss an interesting aspect of one word in our weekly reading, Vayishlach. And that is when Esau meets Yakov and he hugs him and kisses him, it has points, dots, above each letter. There are certain words in the Torah. In the entire Torah, where there are 70-something thousand words, there are only a few words, a handful of words, that have dots on top of letters. This is a very uncommon phenomenon. Many Parshiot, many weekly readings don't have a single dot. But there are sometimes dots, sometimes above one letter or a few letters, and sometimes the entire word is dotted. So there are all kinds of explanations about these weird dots, but the most accepted approach is that dots do what we do by underlining or using italics or bold, somehow making a special emphasis on the specific word. So in this week's reading, we have the word, he kissed him, Esau kisses Yakov, and for some reason it's dotted, so it's trying to draw our attention specifically to this word. So Rashi brings an interesting idea, quite uncommon actually, when the dispute is not simply two different explanations, but the dispute is where the rabbis have exactly opposite explanations. One rabbi says that the reason the word is dotted is because Esau did not kiss Yaakov with full heart, sincerely. That's why it's dotted. And the other rabbi, Rabbi Shimon, says the opposite actually. The reason it's dotted is because here is the only time when Esau kissed Yaakov sincerely. He usually hated Yaakov. But this particular time, the Torah is trying to emphasize that the kissing was actually sincere. But uses an interesting expression, halacha. It's a halacha that Esau hates Yaakov. So generally it became accepted that our sages were not just talking about Esau and Yaakov specifically, but the more general situation when the descendants of Yakov experienced antisemitism all over the place for all kinds of reasons. It's not a natural phenomenon. There was never a good explanation given, a kind of sociological explanation that would somehow make it understandable why Jews are so hated more than anybody else. Jews are communists, Jews are capitalists. Exactly the opposite explanations a lot of times. Everything bad, whatever people want to say. Of course, that doesn't mean everybody hates Jews. Of course, there are exclusions. There are philo-Semites too, people who love Jews. But whatever the case may be, there is a huge amount of anti-Semitism. Now it's more than ever because of the war in Israel. And watch how UN is choosing Israel as a kind of scapegoat for everything, while there are hundreds of thousands of people dying in all kinds of places in the world and all kinds of catastrophes all over. The entire attention is only on Israel. And what's the new blood libel of today? Used to be that they used to claim that the Jews are using Christian blood to make matzah, the most absurd argument ever. Of course, we don't put anything into matzah except water and flour. Everything else would make it not kosher. Moreover, we don't use any blood for anything, for any kind of food. But for some reason, this idiotic libel was so widespread all over the place. So many Jews lost their lives in the horrible tortures because they tried to extract confessions that were using blood for matzah. Unbelievable. What do you have to believe about Jews to even think of such a thing? That they're so wicked that they would kill Christians and use their blood, and knowingly that after that they'll be tortured, they'll be going through the horrible sufferings and be killed eventually, all just to get this drop of blood into the matzah. I mean, this explanation is just so unbelievably stupid and counter logic, and still it was incredibly widespread. Now the new blood libel is that Israel is committing genocide to the Palestinian children. If Israel simply dropped bombs from the air without even choosing anybody, not specifically targeting civilians, but without trying to protect civilian lives, there would be hundreds of thousands of people dead. In a place like Gaza, in a tiny segment with all kinds of rockets sitting in kindergartens and hospitals, simply bombing those places which Israel has full right, by the way, to bomb, because these are lethal weapons that can kill Israeli citizens. Simply bombing them indiscriminately, every place where there are rockets, just bomb them immediately. That would cause hundreds of thousands of civilians be dead immediately. But Israel doesn't do that. Even according to Hamas numbers, which are definitely inflated and where they count a lot of times their own bombs that explode as if it's Israel who did it. But even if we were to take their numbers, it's still not hundreds of thousands. So the numbers are so small compared to what Israel is trying to do. It's unbelievable how far Israel goes, much more than Americans or anybody else in similar circumstances, in order to prevent civilian casualties. People are given over 1 million leaflets dropped, phone calls, WhatsApp messages. Leave this place. This is what we're going to bomb. Give us the time. We need to bomb this place because there's a rocket in there. But really, according to the law, they're allowed to bomb a place where there is a rocket, even if there will be civilian casualties. They're not allowed to bomb just civilians. But when it's against the Israeli citizens, that at any moment another rocket can be fired and more people can be killed, they're fully allowed to bomb. But they don't do that because they try to protect civilians to the best of their ability. So many soldiers died because of the ground operation. They could have just bombed from the air. There would be not a single soldier dead among Israelis, and there would be only civilian casualties. So what? They're just trying to destroy the rocket systems which Hamas places in the most populated areas, in kindergartens and in schools and in church, in mosques and everywhere else. But they don't do that. And at the same time, UN and the various leftist media sources, which relies on Hamas and on people who are close to the terrorists and terrorists themselves, is fully accepting their new blood libel. So there was a person in the Warsaw ghetto named Rav Menachem Zemba. I don't know how many of you have heard about him. He was a very interesting individual. Before his own death in Warsaw ghetto, he was thinking about the phenomenon of antisemitism and says that that's why Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai uses this expression halacha. It's a halacha. It's not really a illogical thing that there's anti-Semitism. It's a halacha. Germans could have benefited from Jews tremendously. Jews were some of the better scientists. Einstein was a German Jew. They were the greatest Jews all over the place. Jews did so much good to so many different people. But they hate us. There's no explanation for it, at least not on the level of why they do it. The explanations why Hashem uses sometimes anti-Semitism to bring us back, to make sure we don't assimilate. But in terms of why they hate us, they can't explain it themselves. They'll use anything that's bad, they'll use about the Jews. The Jews are murdering Gazian children, the Jews are murdering Christian children, the Jews are capitalists, the Jews are communists, the Jews are always, whatever is bad, that's the Jew. Now again, I'm not claiming that every non-Jew thinks that way, of course not. Everybody knows there are a lot of very good people, and in America in particular, the general public opinion does not listen to some of these leftist media sources, and the president chose what is described generally today as moral clarity. Okay, I understand. The situation is not as bad as in some of the other places of the world. But still, the amount of anti-Semitism is skyrocketing. The fact that Jews and a Jew in college can be pursued because he's a Jew, simply because he's a Jew. He or she is a Jew. And in Europe, it's even worse. And that's considering that most American Jews are not even such big supporters of Israel, for that matter. They're just regular people. American Jews, for the most part, those who are in regular colleges, they don't have a lot of association with Jews. But this is exactly the type of anti-Semitism that from times of Hitler was incredibly popular. That it wasn't even based on religion or based on anything. It's just the Jew is hated. Tremendous anti-Semitism, and the spike of it is mamash unbelievable. In the colleges where people are supposed to be smarter and supposed to evaluate, no. I'm not even talking about the demonstrations where they still bring Nazi symbols, the crying of again, let's gas all the Jews, let's kill all the Jews. Who would have thought that this would be happening openly? Even during World War II, there wasn't such a support for Nazis. Nazis themselves didn't really open gas the Jews. That's why they were later Holocaust deniers, because Nazis did a good job in covering up. They weren't open about it. Hamas is very open about what they want to do to all Jews. And still, surprisingly enough, there are people who will support that. It's really unbelievable that less than 100 years passed and pretty much nothing changed. I hope Hashem will have mercy on his children. Hashem Mozli Amo Yiten, Hashem Yivarech et Amo B'Shalom.